I am joined by Dr. Nekeshia Hammond, a psychologist and motivational speaker known for her work in mental health and leadership development. She is also the founder of Hammond Psychology and Associates. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we're going to jump straight into your background as mental health professional. When did you know you wanted to be a psychologist and work in the mental health space? And then can you tell us a little bit about your journey, from the beginning to how you got to where you are now?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Gosh, wow. My journey's been pretty long here, I feel like. But I learned more about psychology when I was in undergrad. And I knew from a very young age I wanted to help people. I wanted to help kids, especially at the time. Like even just growing up, I thought about being a pediatrician, like all these different things. But really when I got into undergrad at the University of Florida is when I learned more about what it meant to be a psychologist. So in the beginning, 17 years ago, in the beginning when I started my practice, I initially was in the practice more full time at the time, doing evaluations and doing therapy for mostly kids and teenagers. And then fast forward to today, 17 years later, I do have the private practice. I've been able to bring on a couple of therapists to help more in the community. And I split my time doing a lot of different things. So part of the time I am at the practice still. Part of the time I'm speaking to different organizations about burnout prevention and also writing books. So yeah, it's been a great journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's not like I guess a traditional route would be like, you're just a psychologist who sees patients, but
Yeah.
obviously do like motivational speaking, like group therapy, and kind of more like event based stuff. So like very, very
Yeah.
well rounded.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, I talk a lot about sports on the show and on
Yeah.
social media, and you are starting to get more into kind of the psychology of sports and athletes, correct?
Yeah, it's been so interesting. So the last, gosh, I would definitely say around COVID actually, I started a lot more work in the area of burnout prevention and leadership. And then, fast forward, like you said, today, I'm really fascinated by elite mindsets. So I've always also been fascinated by elite athletes, of course, and their mindset of what it takes to, be at the top of
Hmm.
the game, if you will. So I've recently developed a program for coaches, training staff who work with elite athletes to make sure that they're also taking care of themselves and understanding better mental resilience so they can better help themselves and of course the athletes that they work with.
Yeah, that's amazing and really interesting too. Of like, yeah, what it takes to be an elite athlete and like how their minds are different maybe than the average person who
Yeah.
who is not a professional athlete or even like college level, whatever we consider a high level sport. Like training your mind while you're playing, right? Because obviously like our mind affects our behavior, and I feel like when you're playing sports there's a lot of pressure, right? And your
Oh,
mind
for
can
sure.
really get out of hand quickly. For like my experience growing up playing sports, like I did not have a good mental awareness and mindset when it came to controlling my behaviors and everything that was being thrown at me and playing sports at a high level.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so important. Like you said, like it's hard. You know, Thankfully now I feel like we're more in the era of discussing mental wellness and resilience and you know, there's this There's this odd, like, balance of, yes, being very hardcore, of course, getting to the top of careers and sports and, whatever things that we're striving to do. But then there's also this conversation, which I love now in this era of making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, which it is possible to do both, right?
Yeah.
I feel like in the olden days, we thought it was just like one directional. I know for me as well, like there
Yeah.
was no conversation I remember about self-care growing up. So now it's like,
Like
no, you
hustle
really can.
culture.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, you really
bad. It
can.
was really
Yeah, it's
bad.
so bad. Like you can take care of yourself. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really exciting. I'm excited to watch your journey into the sports world, and one of the reasons
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you, but the other main reason was your book Mindset Training. So that's how I discovered you, found you on social media, and I'm really happy to have you on, and we're going to get into, inspiration behind the book, obviously, and then into some of the topics that resonated with me, and I know that you've mentioned that have resonated with other folks too that you've crossed paths with. Okay, so the first topic is dangers and consequences of negative self-talk. So I know we discussed previously, a lot of us growing up were never really taught, to pay attention to how we speak to ourselves and how the instrumental effect that has. So can you speak a little bit about, that topic from your book and kind of like what you tell others when it comes to negative self-talk?
It's really important to the first step is self-awareness. So it's really important to work on recognizing the things that you say to yourself because we are literally in our thoughts 24/7. So, of course, outside influences affect us, social media, other people, all these things around us, but also especially what we're telling ourselves is really important. So, what tends to happen is when you really start to be aware of your thoughts, you notice a lot of negative thoughts. That's a common thing. But sometimes there's different themes that we have, like we're not good enough, or we're too, fill in the blank, or just like reliving certain things from the past, maybe not forgiving ourselves or someone else. Like there's all these things that happen to us, and then it can lead to very negative self talk. But when we work on making sure, whether that's through affirmations, whether that's through working on changing your thought process, it really goes a long way in your mental wellness. And I do want to say that I don't want to minimize, like, sometimes this is a hard thing to do on your own. So you can try this on your own or reach out to a mental health professional or a coach or just someone else to help you get through that. We're all in a different place in our wellness journey, but it is really important for us to be working on our self talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has, different degrees of where they're at on their mental health journey. And sometimes talking to a professional is the better route, versus taking it on by yourself can
Mhm.
be very overwhelming for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, before I read your book, I was not aware of like my negative thoughts at all. I had just become so accustomed to it.
Yeah.
Right, and it was just, like, a normal part of my life, and then I was able to, like, stop for a second and be like, "Oh, wow, there's a lot going on."
Yeah.
Yeah, and at first it is overwhelming and, like, kind of sad to realize, and then you just have to, be like, "Okay, well, what am I gonna do now?" And then, in your book, you talk a lot about 2 replacing one, like you said, being aware, recognizing it's the first step, and then also replacing the negative thoughts with a positive thought too. So it's
Yeah.
like if you can recognize a negative thought, like, oh, I'm not good enough for this or that, and then, asking yourself, why are you thinking that? And then what can you replace it with that's more positive?
Yeah. And sometimes, so again, like you said, we're at different degrees of our, mental wellness journey, but sometimes it's too hard of a leap. Like, let's say, someone listening to this is like, I really, really am a huge self critic and I don't think I'm good enough for my job or my relationship or whatever it is that it is. It's instead of going the, like, 180 route and being like, "I'm the best person I know," like, right? Like, that may be too hard for our brains to comprehend, plus your brain is just gonna reject it, but you can literally just kinda meet yourself somewhere in the middle and be like, "You know what? I'm working on being a better version of myself. I'm working on thinking more positively." Like, that's a true statement, like, your brain can more believe that, but it is a matter of it really, really is a matter of the language that you're using, in your own head and just taking those baby steps sometimes to get to the point where you can tell yourself a positive story about yourself.
It's a long journey. Yeah, I would say it's even been like maybe a year and a half now since I like kind of became aware of negative thought patterns. And so it's still it's a long journey. It's not like, oh, just because you're aware of it now it's going to be fixed. um
Exactly.
yeah, and just kind of, setting yourself up for a better life, but knowing it's 1% better every day situation.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you also talk about, how strong emotions can trigger certain reactions for us and kind of how our emotions can distort reality. And I felt like that really stood out to me and felt really important because we've all, experienced strong emotions that, felt like the end of the world or just felt really, really intense and kind of like you say in your book, it can kind of make you feel like you're in a different reality than you are. So, can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real thing, like, really strong emotions like anger or really strong anxiety or sadness or whatever it is that we're going through. When we make decisions from that place, well, first of all, we might not be happy with the decisions we make just because we really are distorting what's going on around us. But when we work on, and it is a journey, but when we work on taking a pause, like recognizing like, you know what, I'm really angry in this moment. Let me take a pause before I write that email or before have that conversation with someone. Like we can work on, right? Like making better decisions. And it's okay if you have to do that, right? Like it's okay if you have to just take a pause because you know you are revved up in whatever way emotionally and get yourself back into a grounded space. And that might not be like a 30-second thing. Like you might need a couple minutes, a couple hours, a couple days, right? Like to kind of process your emotions. But that taking the pause is can be really, really helpful for our own mental health and also, of course, for the people around us too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just you got again being able to recognize that like you're in a high state of emotion and that period between feeling that emotion and then taking action is like
Yeah.
the key to focus on, right? Of like you don't have to immediately react, even though I feel like the emotions will sometimes tell you like, oh, you need to react now, you need to do
Of
this
course.
now. And then it's like then we have like these behaviors that we're not happy with, or like we know we've made a mistake, said something we shouldn't have said, done something we shouldn't have done because we didn't take that time to pause. And I think a lot of people maybe aren't aware that they have that option, and it's also like you said, it's a practice. So like it takes a lot of
Yeah.
time,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
depends on where you are at with your journey and how long you've been working on your mental health. It's not like a switch by any means.
No.
Um, but yeah, just continuing to work on it, and hopefully you see like slow progress over time.
Yeah, yeah, and even, it's funny, like, we give kids, like, timeouts sometimes. We're like, "They need to have a timeout
Yeah.
because of their behavior or their strong emotions," but it's like, we need that sometimes too as adults, like, give yourself not as a punishment, but give yourself a timeout. Like, if you need to step into another room at work or, at home or wherever, like, give yourself a time out. Like,
Yeah.
sit in a calm place, like, just try to regroup yourself and just be in that practice. Again, it's not overnight, but be in that
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, no, that's a funny comparison,
Yeah.
because yes, adults very much need timeouts too, but
We
it's
do.
like it's our responsibility to give it to
Exactly.
ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So last one kind of on emotion, like intense emotions, mismanagement of emotions. You write in your book that it's the reason for a lot of insecurities, bad relationships, and conflicts. So we kind of already touched on this a bit. We could just go a little bit more into how like intense emotions really affect our confidence, leading to like toxic relationships or toxic behavior patterns, and arguments.
I mean, for all of us, we're, kind of guilty sometimes. We get into these strong emotions and then we almost get into a self-blame game, unfortunately, and our confidence, like you mentioned, is lowered because again, it's you can really almost be in like a different reality when you're operating from a place of really strong feelings, instead of being the typical wherever your norm is for your feelings. The same thing in relationships, whether it's with a coworker, whether it's with supervisor, significant other, family member, friend, like those strong emotions do impact other people. Energy is very contagious, right? So it does impact rooms that you're in as well, which is why it's really important for, to begin the process even or continue the process of working on how we show up for ourselves and for others through regulating our emotions.
You said a line about giving yourself permission to change, and heal, and go after a bigger, better life that you deserve. I think just the framing of giving yourself permission, allowing yourself permission. That was the first time I had ever heard something like that. And I think I believe something you said that people often approach you about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has like really changed their mind, which was the whole point of the book. It's called mindset training.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about, that teaching, and that part of your practice?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's interesting because so before we begin any journey, right? If it's you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to get a job promotion, whatever the journey is, the goal, on the mental health side and the wellness side too, you really have to start with giving yourself permission, right? So you wouldn't just be like, I want to lose 20 pounds. Like you would make that decision first, give yourself permission, be like, okay, I'm gonna go on this journey, I'm gonna go to the gym, eat better, or whatever it is you need to do to lose the weight. But it is the same thing on the healing side as well, as you make that commitment to yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to work on this healing journey from whatever the thing was or the incident was. that happened to you, or maybe there's something, like I said, you need to forgive yourself or whatever it is. Like, it's a matter of making that commitment to yourself, but it's also a matter of understanding, for some of us, there's worthiness issues. So understanding that you deserve to be emotionally healthy, you deserve to be happy, you deserve to have joy, you deserve to be healed. Like, you deserve those things, right? But it takes the mindset shift first to get to the point where you can say, okay, I'm going to allow myself to heal.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that, and I feel like too it kind of just changes of, like, the reason of why you're doing it, because
Yeah.
like, you can say, like, I wanna get in shape more, I want this job, and sometimes it's more for, like, external reasons, and I think what this mindset shift does is it really forces you to look inward and ask yourself, and give you the motivation to do it kind of, like, for internal purposes, right? Giving yourself permission, to change and go after things that are gonna make you happier in the long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay for us to do things that make us happy, right? For sure.
Yeah, which sounds, like, so simple and so
Yeah.
easy, but, it's not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people, could really benefit from hearing that and learning that and starting to practice, thinking that way every single day. Because I know when I did it, it gave me a lot of courage, I guess I would say, because maybe I was lacking that previously, but I think what it does is it really helps, when you wanna make big changes in your life, it is scary, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are held back, right, because of the fear,
Mhm.
and so what it does is it kinda gives you the courage to spring into action, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Which leads me into a quote that you included, in this book. So, "The dark does not destroy the light, it defines it. It's our fear of the dark that casts our joy into the shadows." And that's by Brene Brown. So, you included this in your book. You wanna talk a little bit about why and what that specific quote means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's God, this is it's so I wish I had, like, easy advice. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard. Okay, it's hard until it's easier. But especially when I think about that quote, I think about, especially when we're in really dark times of our lives, we all have times of darkness. To remember that there is still light. Um, there is still light within us, whatever that looks like. It may be spiritual or not, but there is a part of us that can have hope. There is a part of us that can have joy even through the darkest times. And also, I think of how, no, like, none of us are like, "Hey, let's sign up for the adversity lesson here." But the positive of going through difficult things sometimes in our dark seasons is it hopefully does take us to a better place, if we're willing to learn the lessons through it, to be guided through it, to understand that it is possible to be a better version of yourself through it, even though it's a really difficult season. And again, I know we're not, like, excited. I'm not excited to go through dark times. I know none of us are, but again, just being in the mindset of saying, you'll get through this. And when you do, the resilience that you're building from it is going to be something that'll help you in the future, because that's how our brains work. That's how it's wired. It's like a muscle. You build the resilience, the neuroplasticity, all the things, and then the next situation, you'll be better equipped to handle it. So there is there is hope. Is sort of what I got from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Building the resilience, which again, takes awareness, time,
Yeah,
practice, and then, on the reverse side, if someone isn't working on the resilience, that's when, things can get even darker,
exactly.
scarier. And, the quote saying, like, the dark does not destroy the light, but it can cast your
Yeah.
joy into the shadows. And then you can get very stagnant there. Very
Mhm.
easy to get stuck there. So I think the quote, even though it is quite, dark, um, it really, makes you think about how you wanna keep hope, but, like, you have, a choice. Like, you can make
Yeah,
the choice to leave the shadows at any time, and I think that's really important. But again, it's not easy.
no.
Of course, sometimes it's easier to stay in the shadows, but if you really wanna, make changes to your life, significant changes, go after a bigger, better life, building up that resilience, like you said, which kind of ties into my next question. You talk a lot about, building your mental armor up so that you don't become stagnant. Any quick advice you could give to like viewers about, maybe how you build your mental armor up? Because I know you do relate, a lot of the stuff in the book to your personal journey.
Yeah.
And then also, just in general, like quick tips for, someone who might be struggling to build resilience and build their mental armor up.
One of the things, like a very practical tip I would say is to really sit down with yourself. If you wrote out like the top 5 or 6 things in your life that you felt was so difficult, you thought mentally that you could not get through, you thought it was going to break you down, you thought your life is over, like just we all have our difficult moments. Like if you wrote that out and remember that you did get through that, that you did have the resilience to get through that. Now, granted, there may be some pain, emotional pain still attached to the situation, but the point is you got through it. So when you think again of your top 5 to 6 moments where you're like, man, because sometimes we forget, we forget like how strong we are. I always say we're a lot stronger than we think sometimes or that we remember. But when you sit down and you write out like, "Man, wait a minute, I remember I went through this situation and I came out okay from it. I remember this situation, I thought I couldn't make it and I was okay from that," right? Like just writing that out and remembering that, it helps you to start to remember you're like we are mentally resilient. And it helps you to remember that you can get through, right? Like so one of the things for me, if I were writing on the list, on my own list, I think about losing my mentor back in 2020, which was unbelievably difficult. Like extreme amount of grief. I still have grief now, but not as heavy as 2020. And it really was a situation I was like, okay, this is gonna like break me all the way down. Like I don't know how I can get through that. Right. And there was a series of things I did. I talk about a little bit in the book, of course, but there's a lot of things I did. I mean, my faith and just self-care and all the things like to work through that grief journey. But again, now I could say, you know what, I got through a really, really difficult period. Like, so I'm able to, like, I mean, I wouldn't wanna go through that situation again, but I can tell myself, like, I went through a really difficult time and I got through it. And your brain starts to believe like, "Okay, maybe I can handle stress again. Maybe I can be resilient in the next, you know, bump of life that's gonna come up," right? Like, that's just how our brains work. It's sort of like also I always think of, like, the roller coaster example where you're, like, so fearful, you're like if you are a person that was fearful of roller coasters and you think all these things and you have all this high level of anxiety and then you go on the roller coaster, you get off, it's like, okay, you're still alive, like, none of the worst things happen, you didn't get stuck on there, you didn't fall off, all those things, like, your brain goes, "Oh, wait, okay." Like, you made it through, like, it's okay, right? It's sort of that type of pattern that we have to start to develop, and remembering, again, like, what are the things that you got through? That maybe you were fearful of, that maybe you didn't think you could get through, but you made it through. You were resilient in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you said that in my mind, I tried to like, quickly think of a few.
Yeah.
And you're right, we do often, go through hard times and then almost like forget it because I
Yeah.
don't think most people are, writing down went through this
Yeah.
terrible time, et cetera, and then are like keeping track. But that could
Mhm.
actually, be a game changer for you to go back and be like, yes, I got through this really hard time and I remember it. And I remember how like intense the emotions felt at
Yeah.
that time, which kind of goes back to our conversation at the beginning of like when emotions are really intense, whether it's like anger, sadness, like you don't feel like yourself. Like you're
Yeah.
probably, not yourself technically,
Yeah.
until the emotions start to subside. Again, it really depends on, what kind of trauma you've been through and what your own experience was like, and there's varying levels and degrees. But yeah, that's very interesting, like writing stuff like that down because obviously that's not a natural instinct to
Yeah.
want to write it down and journal it, and it can also be tough, to to face something like that.
Yeah.
um but if you think that that's something that could help you, it could be very beneficial. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna definitely take note of that and kind of go back and do that because yeah, there's definitely been times we've all been through where like it really does feel like say I'm not gonna say the end of the world because again that's very dark, but
Yeah. Yeah, but
just
interesting.
like a very like very difficult time. Move into abundance versus scarcity mindsets. So this was another really interesting thing in your book that stood out to me that I wasn't really tracking prior to, your teachings and what you talk about in the book and how it can really shift your life. So when you have an abundance mindset, you talk about how like you really don't have people who have an abundance mindset don't really have time to, be jealous of another person's success or, seeing someone else succeed shouldn't make you feel bad inherently
Yeah,
because you're too busy working on yourself and going after your goals. Whereas people with a scarcity mindset might feel more feelings of jealousy, or probably just feel bad about themselves and compare themselves more frequently. So you talk a little bit about that when it comes to mental health.
for sure. So it's, exactly what you just said, like as far as like abundance mindset, to understand that you are very worthy of good, positive things happening to you, that other people's success does not mean that like all of a sudden you have to dim your light. It doesn't mean no one's taking anything away from you by their success. Hopefully, it's a journey also, but hopefully we can get into places where we can celebrate each other more instead of seeing, of course, on social media or whatnot, like, why did that person get this? Or why, there's a comparison thing that happens on social media sometimes, but instead being
Definitely.
happy. Yeah. Being happy for others and their progress on their journey, because even though your journey may look completely different, well, I believe maybe it's more of my spiritual belief, but what is for you is for you. It's not gonna pass you by. There's plenty of abundance in the world in different forms, but it does take us to get out of our limiting beliefs and really start to think about and understand, like, your life can be happier, it can be more joyful, it can be fuller, whatever that looks like for you, like that is possible for you. But it starts with your mindset instead of looking for things to go wrong, saying, see, like it's about like the evidence that you feed your mind. So if you say like, okay, there's a lot of great things in the world, there's a lot of great people in the world, great opportunities, that's more of an abundance mindset versus you're looking around and trying to find things to confirm, you know, almost like this bias of like, see, everything is going wrong. It's a matter of how we our perception and how we decide to start to see the world. And again, this is a journey and it is a process to be aware of our thoughts when it comes to is it, do we live in an abundant world or have this scarcity mindset?
And it really starts with, like you said, your mind and your internal thoughts, right? Like you can
Yeah.
work on even if you feel like, you do have a scarcity mindset now, if it's something you don't like, that's not making you feel good, you can start working
Yeah.
on changing it. And yeah, I think comparison obviously we know is like the thief of joy, right? So
Yes.
seeing people on social media, it's often highlight reels of their life and then we get stuck comparing ourselves of like, oh, we're not there yet. We have so far to go. Could really, I think, hinder like your efforts sometimes. And
Hmm.
instead, if you just spent that energy focusing on like, oh, that's great for that person, and then continue to, like focus on what you're doing, sounds better to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it really is a highlight reel. I'm so glad you said that. I can't even oh my gosh. I meet so many people and I've had so many people open up to me and literally say just that. Like they have people have literally confessed that like what they're putting on social media is like a complete lie. Many people actually that I've spoken to. And so we have to remember that again, if you see a 15-second video clip of someone, I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. Like, you have no idea what their
Yeah.
day truly was like, but we think we do because we've seen this, like, 15-second video clip, which is a little scary, um, for
Yeah.
our
It's pretty
for our mental
scary. Yeah.
health. But just a reminder, it is a highlight reel that you were seeing.
Right. Yeah. And, people film things a while ago and then they post it, like you said. So, um, yeah, just being really mindful of like, social media isn't real life. It's a great tool and it does connect us, but I think, really approaching it with a grain of salt is key.
Yeah.
So the last part of the interview, I thought we would talk about more, tools and actionable takeaways for people listening or watching. Kind of just I say quick. We're gonna go through them quickly. None of them are quick. Quick things people can start implementing starting today and, over time to kind of help, better their mental health, their habits, routines, etc. So the first one we kind of touched on a little bit, which you talk a lot about in the book, which is the mental health detox.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about writing out kind of, I guess, like our traumas, but this is also, writing out, what are your daily habits? What are your routines? What are your consistent relationships like? Do you diet? Do you exercise? Do you spend time
Yeah.
alone, etc.? So can you talk a little bit about, how important a mental health detox is and how often someone should do it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I always recommend to really look at it. You can look at it like physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and sort of put it in those boxes for you, depending on what season you are in your life. Like, for example, like your physical health box, you may be like, okay, I need to get better sleep. Maybe that's the thing in that particular box to start to work on. And your detox might be, maybe I don't need to stay up so late at night scrolling on social media, for example, right? Or it could be your diet. And you're like, you know what? Obviously you need to work on eating healthier, hydrating more, whatever, that looks like for you. A detox also, well, when I say mental health detox, I do mean adding things in that are beneficial for you and of course taking things out. And then maybe in your emotional, box, if you will, that you're writing like what is it for you that can bring you more positive emotions? Like you can add that in. Or if there's more boundaries you need to put into your life to not have so many things drain your energy, right? Like just sort of jotting down because this all looks different depending on again where you're at in your journey. The same thing with, spiritually, mentally, like what are the things that you need and what are the things that you need to, start to take away in your life and work on restructuring your life, which I'm glad you said it earlier. You can literally do this at any time. I feel like it's so funny because when I host my show Mental Health Moment, I always feel the energy at the very beginning of the year, like December, January, we're all like, yes, our goals, like wellness goals, which is great, but you don't have to wait until the new year to start your goals. Like you can literally start today, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I always recommend too is like mental health check-ins. So I would say to do that on a weekly basis would be ideal. And you ask yourself a couple questions. One is, how am I doing? And asking yourself that because we ask everybody else that sometimes, but remembering to ask yourself, how am I doing? The second question is to ask yourself, what do I need? Again, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And then you ask yourself, the third question is, what step do I need to take today to improve my life, right? And it could be a baby step. It could be I need to take a mental health day or an hour to myself or whatever it is. That is a step that counts. Or maybe you need to add something in, right? A new exercise routine. I don't know. Like, but it's being very intentional of checking in with yourself is a huge part of this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what something that I learned, when I started my more intense healing journey, like again, like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, was really that I needed to remove a lot of things before I can add in the good things, right? The
Yeah.
things that I was missing that I did need to like, feel happier. Emotions was like I had a lot of baggage that I needed to
Yeah.
remove first. And then, that over time, that makes room for the good things that, that you're missing. And I really
Yep.
love what you said about like New Year's resolution and that time of year because that made me realize it's like kind of a scam. It's like why are we waiting till
All the
January 1st and
yeah.
why are we only picking like one resolution? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
started to think about that and I was like, wait, like I don't need to wait till December 31st and I don't need to pick
No.
just one. Like I could be doing this throughout my whole life and imagine like how much better it's going to be. So yeah, I definitely do like minimum monthly check-ins, but usually,
Yeah.
at least a couple times a month, but at least a month. And something that works for me is I try to keep each like month's resolutions or goals to like 3 to 4 things so I don't get like overwhelmed. It's like, okay, these are the three big things I'm gonna focus on and that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whether it's, getting more sleep, hitting the gym harder, or,
Mhm.
spending more time alone or maybe it's spending more time with friends that month but I really
Yeah.
pick like three big things for that month and then it feels simple, right? Like I only have to focus on these things because it can be overwhelming to be like I have to change my whole life, like where do
Yeah,
I even
yeah,
start?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed by that too and so then they just don't start and
yeah, yeah,
that's really a problem because it really does just feel super overwhelming. So yeah, I love the mental health detox and just, writing out, the things that stress us out
Yeah.
and worry us because it's like as soon as you write it out, you can kind of immediately feel a relief
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like, okay, I can see this on paper now. I'm staring at it. Take a deep breath and then, come up with an action plan. It's like, okay, this
Yeah.
is stressing me out. So like, how can I, prevent this or at least lower its intensity going forward?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Whereas I think, a lot of people know that they might not be happy, but then they kinda stop there. They're like, "Ugh, I'm
Yeah.
not happy, I don't know what to do," and then they stop. Whereas it's like, okay, you know, ask yourself, "Why aren't you happy and what can you do about it?" I think that's
Mhm.
really the big missing part that, could be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, one of the things that you also mentioned in your book, is for people to ask if they're thriving or surviving constantly, throughout their life, throughout the year, throughout the months, and I think that's a really important question because, again, I think not everyone is aware if they're in survival mode. And so simply just asking yourself in each phase of your life, am I thriving right now or am I
Yeah.
just surviving? I think
Yeah.
that can really open up a lot of doors for someone's mental health. So, can you talk a little bit about that question, maybe what it's done for you, and then also what it's done for, those that you help?
Yeah. Yeah. So it is working on, again, our self awareness because sometimes, like, depending on the season, like, if you're right now, like, listening to this and you're like, you know what, I'm kind of in my survival season, there's a lot happening. Sometimes we almost have to add in more self care during those times to make sure that mentally, emotionally, and physically, like, that you are doing okay through your surviving season, if you will. And then other times, if you're just like in a great season, you're in a thriving season, everything's sort of on maintenance mode, you still have your self care in there, but you might not need as much, if that makes sense, because everything is just going really well. That's something also to be aware of, right? Like we don't always have to ramp up like all of our that's like taking a mental health day every day. Like obviously we don't always need to do that, but it's making sure that we know what season we're in, to know like, okay, I know I need some extra TLC right now because I have some stuff going on, or like I'm good. I'm more in maintenance mode, right? But it's important to really recognize because otherwise we just kind of operate a little bit like robots and we're just going through life, which is highly not recommended. And then we don't adjust our self care or our check ins with ourselves as needed, which is really, really important for us to do for our health, physical health, and mental health.
Yeah, I think some people can get stuck in survival mode so much so
Yeah.
that they don't even know they're in survival mode, and so
Yeah.
like you said, it's kind of that self-awareness to kind of, like, snap yourself out and be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, like, this is not the life that I want," or, like, "I'm not necessarily, happy." And, what can I do to switch over to thriving mode? And like you said, life is hard and there's a lot of
Yeah.
up and down, so we will go through periods of both constantly until we die.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the self-awareness and, having tools both for when you're in survival mode and even when you're in thriving mode to like a grateful practice of like if you are in a very great place in this phase of your life, holding on to it, being grateful and present for it. So then, when you do switch back to survival mode, I guess when you're switching back and forth, it's not as intense, right? The up and
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
You've built up the mental armor, like, you're aware that life has ups and downs, and, you've got tools in your back pocket that I like to say that I did not used to have, and life was much, much harder then.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, there's just some things like some things are just outside of our control. Actually, a lot of things are outside of our control. So, depending on the situation, you may be able to be like, you know what? I'm in survival mode because of, I don't know, my negative self talk, or maybe I'm doing some self sabotaging behavior or something that you can control and work on getting out of that to get into thriving mode. And then sometimes there's just things, lives, and things happen, and we can't control it, so for the time being, we might be in some survival mode, but we can do our best, like you said, with gratitude and other practices to try to do our best to get through and maybe add in some extra self care in the way that works best for you and still have those moments of joy too, even in the survival mode times.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the last 2 topics wanted to go through with you, first one is making yourself your number 1 priority, how that makes you, better for those around you, and to how that is not selfish. Because
Yes.
I think there's that conversation around like, some people have the mindset of self-care being selfish. And I think that also comes from, communities that don't necessarily have the education around, self-care or mental health. Because maybe, I want to say a lot of like, communities of color, that's not something that has really ever been pushed. And so when you mention self-care, sometimes it's kind of like brushed off or seen as very selfish.
Yeah. 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 No, you're absolutely right. And the thing is that it's so important for us to be taking care of ourselves, not only because yes, of course, it benefits us and our health, but it also helps people around you, which is why I always say it's not selfish at all. You're doing a good service to other people around you. They absolutely positively want the best version of you. They want a grounded version of you. They want a happier, healthy version of you, whether it's family members, friends, coworkers in the community. And I mean, like we can all think of a time. Maybe it's with like customer service. You talk to someone when they're angry and irritable, and now you're frustrated because of that conversation versus someone that's like pleasant. You had a great conversation, you got your issue resolved. You're like, wow, that was great. Like, that was a great experience, right? So, like, we should want to be working on being better versions of ourselves, which part of that comes through self care, but also knowing and understanding that through work, through again, family, friends, community, all the places that you're a part of, they also benefit as well. And positive energy is also very contagious, just like negative energy is, but so is positive energy. So you can help people around you too by working on really making yourself your number one priority.
I know too, just like my own personal experience, like I say, like when I wasn't taking care of my mental health, like not fun to be around. Like you're
Yeah, of
just not,
course.
because it's like,
That's
of
it.
course, you're like, you're unhappy, which, leads to like you being bitter, or just like more moody, and just like not a good vibe. Whereas someone who is like, really taking the time to take care of themselves and doing like proactively doing things right, that's going to make them happier, more pleasant to be around.
For
It
sure.
definitely, yeah. It affects, yeah, like you said, your relationships,
Yeah.
interactions with strangers. Yeah, absolutely. And then the last advice that you mentioned in your book that I wanted to chat about, you talk about giving back and how giving back to, your loved ones, your communities, how that can actually help you in return, and benefit you. Because I don't think a lot of people really frame it that way. And so I thought it was a really interesting way to, frame it, and then actually put it into practice. You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and there's actually research on it too, that you helping other people, whether it's, helping people in your community, your next door neighbor, or whomever it is that you're helping, in the way that you're able to, that it is beneficial for your mental health. I mean, helping others for most people is a feel good thing to do. So it actually helps with releasing those feel good chemicals in our bodies, which of course are beneficial for us to experience. They've done these studies that show that when you do, like, say, random acts of kindness and helping others, that the person who receives the kindness, if you will, they experience it 2 to 3 times higher than what you felt. So let's say what you think you did might be like a 3 out of, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're like, "Oh, what I did, it was a little helpful." But they might experience it as a 9 out of 10. Like, that's how powerful it is for the person receiving that act of kindness. So it's like, not only are you helping, of course you're, you know, helping others, but both of you are benefiting from that transaction of giving back to the community. And what it does is, a lot of times we just, again, life's how we go through things, but when we are in different situations where we're helping others that, even maybe less fortunate than us, it gives us a moment to pause and even have more gratitude of the blessings that we have in our lives, because we're like seeing different needs and we're able to help others. So it gives you a temporary pause of worrying about your own problems. And now you're actually working on helping other people, which actually helps your mental health too.
Yeah. No, that's really great
Yeah.
research. And like you were saying, how like you think something like very simple, like, maybe you smile or wave at
Yeah.
someone at the grocery store. And to you, it's like, oh yeah, like that was pleasant, but it wasn't like, life altering for you. But, someone maybe going through a rough day, just like the smile or whatever, like can mean a lot more to them than we realized. And that's just one example of many. One example like that I can say that I personally do is like, I create a lot of content on social media and sometimes it does really well and other times it doesn't. It's like an up and down game. And so when my content isn't performing well, something that I started doing was I will comment, really positive things on other people's content
Oh,
that I enjoy. And
yeah.
I'll just be like, you're doing really great. I really love your content because of XYZ. And I think, say I do that on like 3 people's, content. That
Yeah.
makes me feel better, like, after I do it, and I'm no longer thinking about, like, "Oh, low performance content day for me."
Mhm.
I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
like, giving out positive energies to others, and then, maybe they needed to hear that because they're
For
also, struggling with engagement or something,
oh, for
and that
sure.
comment to, like, keep going is helpful. So that's just, like, one example that I've, started to incorporate into my days to help.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We just don't know. There's this thing, I don't know if you've seen it on social media. I've seen it like a couple places. Like there's this little mini video of like it's kind of like I don't know, like say 50 people or something are like walking through this intersection and then like you have like above their heads like it'll
Oh,
say like
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
person's going through a divorce, this person just lost their mom, this person this happened, like all the because we forget how much like we don't know what's going on in people's lives. So like you said, it seems simple, a smile, but it's not simple to everyone when they're going through a
Mhm.
rough time and they're like, okay, something positive happened today. Someone smiled at me or someone gave me a compliment or, whatever it was, like it really can go a long way. I've actually had a lot of conversations with people where someone reaching out to them in a really dark time literally saved their lives because they felt like someone cared. So again, that person that was just texting like, "Hey, just seeing how you're doing, love you, miss you," like thinking like, "Oh, it's just a simple text." Like the person that received that, like it literally changed their entire
Needed.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to remember like it seems small to us, but it's not always small to the person receiving it.
Yeah, it's kinda like we're putting out, positive energy into the universe, and
Yeah.
it can multiply,
Oh, for sure.
right? Like, it affects, more people down the road, that we don't even see.
Yeah.
So, like, we're nice to someone, and now that person is nice to someone else.
Exactly. It's
You
a
know
ripple effect too. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. A ripple effect is a great way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Well, that was all the questions I had. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. You've been a really special guest. So
For
thank you.
sure. Thank you.